people tell us that, if it's uncomfortable, that means you should definitely do it. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute. Sometimes, and that's that fear versus intuition. Sometimes if it's uncomfortable, that means you're not supposed to do it. And so it's really like finding a line between those two. And really, sometimes we just have to stop and be like, well, hold on, wait a minute, And I think when you start to do that more and more, then your body is like, oh, you're listening. So, let me speak to you in a way that you can really understand it. And so I think that's very powerful as well.
If you've outgrown your current path, this is your invitation to step out of the hustle and into your purpose and passion. It can be healing, it can be fun, and it can be strategic. This is where you become the boss goddess in your niche and bring your dreams to life. This season, I am happy to announce that the Boss Goddess podcast has partnered with Modern Day Wife. Modern Day Wife is a global membership that provides community and resources to the modern woman who is looking to thrive in her career, relationships, home life, and social and personal life, what they call the 360 view. And they also are very known for putting on these amazing, big, bold luxury events. And their next in-person luxury event is in Los Angeles, and I will be there. And it is called Soirée en Blanc, and it's being hosted at the Sofitel Hotel. And you can get your ticket at the link in the show notes if you are in LA, and you can join me there. And if you're not in LA, then check their list of events at themoderndaywife.com to see if there's one near you. And of course, you can join their online global community as well. Just visit themoderndaywife.com. If you are ready to say yes to redefining what is next for you with podcasting, then I want to invite you to get my Activate Your Passion with Podcast Blueprint. Just go to boss-goddess.co/activate. This is your free 5-day guide where each day I'll send you an email with guidance and a downloadable prompt, exercise, or tool that you can take some action with to begin to get clear on how to pursue what lights you up with the power of podcasting, from how to get started with your topic to how to build your own ecosystem that you can monetize later. Let's redefine what comes next for you so you can step into your goddess era. Just go to boss-goddess.co/activate. Hi, and welcome back to the Boss Goddess podcast. I'm Barcy, your host. And if you've been tuning in to the newer season of Boss Goddess, then you may have noticed an emphasis on leveraging intuition when it comes to business. In fact, I created a whole episode about it called What is an Intuitive Business Strategy, which is episode 152. And I actually go into the history of the word strategy and how it was first connected to being intuitive during war, which I actually found to be really interesting. But then I also created another episode last season called Intuitively Plan Your Brand in 2025 with a Pinterest and journaling practice. And that one is really, again, just how to start taking easeful steps that make sense to you, steps that come from the truth of who you are, that come from your intuition, that are creatively energized and allow you the permission and space to really explore what you want to create next in this sort of unfolding kind of way. Pinterest is a fun way to do that. Journaling is always a great pairing to any new practice that we are approaching. And so I do recommend checking out both of those episodes. I'll link to them in the show notes with a few other intuitively focused episodes because intuition is something that we talk about a lot on this show. Because when we tap into that truth that we already have with us that can guide us in our decision making, and it can inform us on what feels best for us to pursue on a big level, on a small level. It really helps you in any area. And even when you encounter small decisions throughout the day, when you tap into your intuition, we gain this access to a very powerful way to navigate our lives. And my guest today has done just that. She has created a beautiful business infused with this message, infused with lots of intuition to honor yourself in your truth as you are in all of your being. which is to no surprise because once you hear her story and how this business was brought to life and how it unfolded, you'll see how organic creating something from the intuitive connection can really be. Makuyo shares that the vision for SIIKA Herb and Honey Co. was given to her while in Ghana in December of 2021, and she shares that story in the episode today. And the word SIIKA, which is from her paternal Ga language, translates to wealth, luxury, and extreme riches or beauty. So Makuyo envisioned her brand to be able to merge the seemingly divergent domains of the feminine spirit and luxury, revealing their shared depth and richness. And she desires to harmonize her own professional and personal passions by creating a brand that encompasses her journey as a businesswoman with her experiences in holistic health, herbalism, and yoga. She's also a systems engineer. I have to throw that in because it's really interesting how that ties in to this very holistic side of herself too. There's a connection there, and you'll learn more about that in today's episode. But Makuyo goes on to share that she believes that in a world of influence and imitation, women can be both goddesses and go-getters, building their lives and careers on their own terms. And of course, I love that. The brand's mission is to unite holistic health and feminine sensuality with self-care. The carefully curated infusions are created to nourish and nurture the body, mind, and spirit. And if you're wondering how to make more space for your own intuition to speak a little louder and guide you a little more often towards decisions that are in alignment with who you are in both business and in life, Makuyo shares how she cultivated her practice of intuitive connection and self-awareness and how it led to guiding her to creating her brand, SIIKA Honey and Herb Co. Now be sure to listen all the way to the end because Makuyo also shares some guidance on how you can get started with your own intuitive practice or deepen or reconnect with the one you have. Okay, without further ado, here's my conversation with Makuyo. Welcome, Makuyo.
Hi, Barcy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you. I think you have a really beautiful brand, but also an even more perhaps beautiful message connected to that brand. And it's total teaser, but it's very intuitive. It's very feminine. It
Right.
feels sort of guided in the way that it came to be. So we're going to talk all about that today.
Perfect.
Yeah. So speaking of that, like I said, I know that your business idea sort of came to you really intuitively. The way you shared it with me before is like you were being guided. And I want to talk about that story. But before we jump into that, can you start by sharing with us sort of how you originally began connecting with yourself, your intuition, and what I might call also your higher self? But you tell me.
I would say my intuition and more so listening to my intuition. It was really through yoga, right? And I originally started yoga as a way to lose weight. So I used to
Oh.
play soccer competitive soccer when I was younger. And now, I mean, as I got older, I just got to be more of a low impact girly. So I was like, okay, well, let's try yoga. I read it's supposed to help you lose weight. And so I began like kind of intermittently. But over time, I started getting deeper into the practice. I actually took a yoga certification course. I'm actually like a certified yoga teacher. And through that, I really started to, work on breath work, meditation, those sort of things. And it became part of a daily practice. And so through daily meditations and just like calming, slowing down, really listening to myself and the messages that would come through meditation, I started to just started inherently entrusting myself and my intuition more. And when I say trusting my intuition, like knowing that it was my intuition speaking, sometimes it's a fine line between intuition and fear. But I was able to say, okay, well, this is my intuition. Let me see what it's talking about. Let's go down this path and just, begin to follow it and see where it led.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like yoga is and what I call like a gateway introduction to
Right.
things like that for so many people. And yeah, I didn't know that. You also shared about dreams with me previously, so I'd love to talk about that too. But before we jump in, it's really interesting what you said about deciphering intuition and fear, like connecting those two things. Can you tell me more
Right.
about how that's related from your perspective?
I guess from myself, it'll say, even if you meet someone, it's like, don't do that, don't go down that path. And it's like, well, am I not supposed to go down that path because it's for me? Or is it saying, don't go down that path? There's a caution there. In
Hmm.
following my intuition, I realized, I really can tap into other people's energy. And so in that, I kind of struggled with judgment because I was like, well, why am I feeling that way about them? Is there a reason? But
Ah.
like I said, trusting my intuition, it was like, there's a reason for that. So sometimes, especially in business, right? For instance, we people tell us that, if it's uncomfortable, that means you should definitely do it. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute. Sometimes, and that's that fear versus intuition. Sometimes if it's uncomfortable, that means you're not supposed to do it. And so it's really like finding a line between those two and really learning like where it comes from. So for instance, when it's fear for me, and again, just tapping into myself and who I am, when it's fear for me, I feel it like in my chest,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
Versus when it's intuition, I feel it more like I don't feel it as much, but it's kind of more of an ease feeling, right? It's not a tightening. But when it's
Yeah.
fear, it's a tightening. And so just really, it may be the same for you, it may be different, but again, just learning and understanding who you are and being able to trust that.
Thank you. That's a really great way to sort of speak about how those things can feel confusing because I think that is, you hit it on the head where I've heard a lot of people be afraid to trust their intuition because it is
Hmm.
tricky between the ideas of like, well, is this just fear or is this something that is exciting and I have a block around it that needs
Right.
to be worked through or like really figuring out which part it's coming from. And the body is such a great way to check in with that, with trying to understand which one it is. And I think it can live in different parts of the body. Like, I love
Hmm.
that you shared for you that it's the kind of more in your chest when it feels not for you, let's say. But I think for everyone, it does. The simplest way might just be like constriction versus expansion.
Right.
Like,
Expansion. Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, so beautiful. I love that. And it's always a good reminder because as we just go through our days, our daily lives, we are getting these little signals all the time.
Hmm.
But we're so busy or we're so, like connected to what we're doing or focused on what we're doing, I should say, that we're often dismissing these little moments,
Right.
these little
Right.
nudges. So it's just good to go like, oh, that's right. Like, how am I actually feeling in my body about, this weird email that came through? Or, that
Right.
happens all day long, right?
It really does. And like you said, we sometimes, and because we're so busy, sometimes we just have to stop and be like, well, hold on, wait a minute, And I think when you start to do that more and more, then your body is like, oh, you're listening. So, let me speak to you and, in a way that you can really understand it. And so I think that's very powerful as well.
Yeah, I think connecting to ourselves in this way can really be life-changing, as it kind of became for you, as we'll get into all.
Right.
But you also shared with me that you started paying attention to your dreams and symbolism,
Hmm.
and you started to tap into sort of these deep-seated fears that were like surfacing, these unconscious beliefs, and really noticing how to work with them. Can you talk a little bit more about how that came to be and what that was like?
Sure. So I think once I started meditating more, my dreams kind of flowed freer. It's not so much like, I mean, I don't know how everyone else dreams, obviously, but it's, it kind of spoke to me in a different way. And again, trusting my intuition, I'm like, okay, well, there's a message here. Or even when I started, if I was struggling with a decision, I would say, okay, well, can you help me clarify this in my dreams? And so I started just to like pay attention to my dreams more. One thing you can do is start to pay attention to if you're having like recurring dreams or people showing up that you might not have any connection with on a day-to-day basis, but these same people keep showing up in your dreams, it might be a symbol there. So what I started to do with dreams is started to write them down, right? And then I started noticing patterns. And then I started looking at different things and saying, okay, well, this was in this dream and in that dream. Like, and then I see what in my waking life, connects to those. And then I start to decipher them. And again, it's just like with intuition. Once you start to pay attention to your dreams, it comes to you a lot easier what the message is. And our dreams are subconscious, right? So it's that part that we can't say, no, it's not. Yes, it is. We're not making those decisions. It's coming from, the deepest parts of us.
Yes, that's such a good distinction to make because you're right. We can't get, well, some people say you can. You can jump into your dreams and start making decisions. But for the sake of this conversation, that's lucid dreaming, right? It's just flowing and we are experiencing our subconscious minds if we're able to remember the dreams. So,
Mhm.
one, like that is just a whole separate podcast to just talk
Yeah,
about
I
dreams.
actually did that before. So we can talk about that. Yeah. It's all
Ah,
part of a process. And like we spoke, I think it started with, meditation and then paying attention to my dreams. And all of a sudden I was like turning left. And I was like, I don't want to turn left. I want to turn right. And, but it's all a process, right? It's deep-seated work. Absolutely.
yeah. You also talked about in our last talk about, by the way, I always talk with everyone before we jump into a recording so we can kind of have a very nice, guided, easy
Right.
conversation. So that's what I'm referring to when I say that. But you shared that you started to notice these beliefs that maybe were inherited, right? Like we all have that, where there are these things that maybe don't serve us anymore or don't really belong to our core truth. And
Hmm.
that was some of the stuff that was coming up when you were taking a look at the symbolism and the dreams and
Right. Absolutely. I think in college specifically, I really struggled with. So let me go back a little bit. I think in high school, that was probably like my truest self. She was a little raw, a little unfiltered, but it was 100%, Makuyo. And then so I went into college. I joined a sorority, and sorority life can kind of pretty much put you in a box because you're supposed to be a certain way. You have to fit almost a certain mold.
Mm.
And so for me, I'm like definitely someone who breaks the mold, right? There's no box to put me in. So I did struggle with that a little bit in college. And it actually took me like a long time to get out of that. And so paying attention to my dreams, a fear would be when people from college showed up. And
Uh,
I did, and I didn't talk to them anymore. Most people from college didn't talk to them anymore, but that's one of the recurring patterns that I started. And it also affected how I showed up in my business online because, I was afraid of that sort of judgment too. And then I had to just tell myself, like, if they judge me or if they don't, how does that impact me and how does it impact my business? So I had to start showing up, for my business and for myself differently once I started to realize that.
wow, that really hits home for me because I'm kind of going through this right now. I'm
Okay.
evaluating this exact thing in my business right now because I just did some new rebranding and I'm leaning into, women. We're having more women on the show. We're having more conversations like this. And it caused me to really ask the question too. From my own past, it's similar to yours, where I felt sort of boxed in by a certain group or by
Right.
judged by a certain friend group throughout my life and things like that, that starts to creep into like how I'm showing up or not showing up the way I want to
Right.
in my business specifically. And these things come or show up, I should say, if we're paying attention, if we are able to notice them. And I have to give credit to the intuitive work for me to be able to notice it and make this connection and have conversations like this with people like yourself who are also doing that kind of work. It really helps me stay attuned to how I'm showing up. So
Right.
it's a really interesting thing to take a look at. And it's just exactly what it's just so true. It's what happens when we want to level up, is what I'm trying to say. When we're trying to do something bigger than we've done so far or do something new, it really causes us to have to take a look at ourselves and where we're stopping ourselves and why and where that came from and where that subconscious belief lives.
Yeah, I took a course. I take courses all the time. I'm like a lifelong learner. But they were saying, generations ago, we had to be communal people because that's how we survived, right? And if you were an outcast, you could literally die, because you had to rely on your community. So it is an inherent belief that we have to be a part of a community. But I think it's like, what community are you supposed to be a part of, right? Because every community isn't for you, but you really have to kind of find your own. And once you do, you'll thrive there, So it is important to have conversations with like-minded people, like-minded women, but everybody isn't going to meet you where you are. And I think that's just something we have to be okay with.
And I think that's also opportunities to learn too, right? When we can be in spaces that are different than
Hmm.
ourselves too. Kind of take what we can and leave what we don't need there. And I think we do need a little bit of both so that we can keep reflecting
Absolutely.
and intentional ways, you know? What was the name of that course? Do you remember?
I think it's the Women Love Power course.
Oh,
So a course called
nice.
Aisha Faines. Unfortunately, she passed some years ago, but she has this course, and hopefully they keep it going. She has a foundation, but it's a very impactful course.
Thank you for sharing that. And so sorry to hear that she's passed. I also hope it's still going because I would love to check that out and link to it for anyone who was intrigued by what you just shared
Absolutely.
in the show notes. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to your story, let's flash forward and flashback because now it's in the past in 2021. You went to Ghana
Hmm.
and you had sort of this like aha moment or like a download, or people would describe it different ways, but something that you noticed when you were in the market and it kind of spawned the unfolding of what came next, which is what your business now is. But can you take us there and sort of what brought you to Ghana in that moment? And then how did you discover what you discovered when you were in the market that day?
Okay, so my paternal family is from Ghana or present day Ghana. We are part of the Krobo ethnic group. And so I was visiting family in Ghana in the market, and it was just, a regular market day. So I thought, and I passed this jar of honey. And I saw it and I kept going. And then I turned around and went back. And I like picked it up. I looked at it. I put it down. I walked away. And then I came back to it and it wasn't saying like buy it. So I just took a picture with my phone. I didn't know
Oh, okay.
why. I just took the picture. I said, because something is drawing me to this honey. And so I just, went on about my way. And interestingly enough, the name of my brand, SIIKA, is also a God word. It means wealth, luxury, extreme beauty, or riches. But that had already come to me in a dream, right? And so I knew, again, I knew
Oh.
something about this word was sticking out, and I just wrote it down. I didn't know what it for. I was like, is this like a child's name? I didn't know what it was, right? I just wrote it down. But, over time, just listening, following, I was able to put that honey together with that word. And, it just really led into a legacy brand, an intuitive brand, which is Sheikah Herb and Honey Co.
And that's the brand you have now
Yes.
that if you're watching, there's a beautiful
Yeah.
display of it behind you. It's really luxury looking. It looks really like, I don't know how to describe it, just like yummy and divine and luxurious and warm in its energy from when I look at it, which is really beautiful. It's like there's just like this lovely warmth to it. I just wanted to share that
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. I would like the brand to represent nourishment, right? And whatever that means to you, whether it's internal or external, it's very much a nourishment focus.
I love that. So tell me how you evolved this moment into like, I'm going to go do something about
Hmm.
this experience I'm having with this honey bottle. Like, you didn't buy it, but you had this name. And then what happened?
I think I just started building from there and looking into honey and the properties of honey and infusion. So my grandmother is originally from Mississippi. She's indigenous, the family's indigenous. And so we still have land there. But when she moved to DC, she started a community garden, right? So I first learned with working in garden and with herbs with her in that community garden. So I've always been connected to plants in that way and herbs that
Mhm.
way. But the honey kind of just spoke to me differently. And so I looked into honey and their properties. It's a concept that's very much associated with feminine energy because of the flow, the sweetness. It's a very versatile. Can use it for internal properties as well as external. And I just really just trusted and built the brand off that. In that same vein, the honeys in my line are named after the women in my family. My mother, my grandmother's my great grandmother, and I just connected it all with feminine energy, almost like physically as well as metaphysically.
Yeah, it feels really symbolic in that way. With that, I'm wondering, as you were researching honey, was there any sort of discoveries about its properties that you learned that you can share with us that are either just healing, good for the skin, good for the body, good for anything you want to share about, like just the interesting discoveries you made about honey itself?
Sure. I think we're most familiar with honey, obviously, as something that we ingest, right? Whether it's the substitute for sugar or sweetener, we put it in our tea. If we have a sore throat, we say to use honey that way. But it can also be used
Mhm.
topically. It's like the anti-inflammatory, the antioxidant properties are used for anti-aging or aging gracefully, I like to say. as
Yeah.
well as I did a blog post on it. And I remember a young lady commented on the blog post and she was in nursing. And she said, wow, we actually learned, we did a whole course study on the properties of honey and its healing. It has wound healing properties. It's great for acne, any variety of ailments, right? And it is just a very versatile product. I use honey daily, internally as well as externally. I mean, it's amazing. It's a very nourishing ingredient.
Thank you for sharing that. And so you infuse your honeys with herbs,
Correct.
right?
Real herb.
How does that enhance, or how do you create the combinations? Like, what is the process there in your decisions?
Yeah, so again, all of this came through like dream work, just working with my dreams. And I had the honey. I said, okay, well, I just don't want a honey brand, right? And so the infused honey came, and I was trying to understand, okay, well, what should I infuse it with? I tried a couple different things, and I really just went with, okay, this feels right or it doesn't feel right. And again, they're named after the women in my lineage, so the herbs I use kind of spoke to each of those women's personalities, right? So, for instance, Freddie is my maternal grandmother. Her honey is infused with pimento pepper, so it's like sweet and spicy, and that's exactly how she was. People always talk about her telling dirty jokes. She was super sweet, but she always told dirty jokes. She would wait till the
How
kids were out.
funny.
Yeah, she would wait till the kids were out the room, but she's gonna tell that joke. And I remember my uncle, he's the youngest. She had 12 children. And I remember he would be like, Mom, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she told that joke. But that's just how she was. So her honey is sweet and spicy. And I wanted to be very intentional in using herbs and organic herbs because, again, it's not just for taste, it's for wellness as well. And so,
Hmm.
putting those herbs in there, there's cinnamon and there's cloves. You get those property of the herbs as well, those warming properties, good for blood flow, all those properties within, a spoonful of honey.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that story. That makes perfect sense. And it's just inspiring to know that each decision still has some component of listening to your guidance, listening
Right.
to your intuition, and honoring your family as well, the women in your family in that way. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we talked a little bit about it being sort of this representation of femininity as well. But I want to point out that you're also a systems engineer.
Right.
Can you tell us first what that is so that we understand? And then I have a question around that too.
Sure. So systems engineering is really, we call it life cycle engineering process. So you take an idea, you say, okay, this is what I want to do. You write down requirements, how we're going to test it, prototype, and you take it all the way from an idea to an actual product, right? That you either product or system that you put on the market, a finished system. So it's really the entire life cycle of engineering.
Oh, okay. Well, this sounds very beneficial to starting a business.
It is. It's very much a systematic process. And like I said, with intuition, it's following something and saying, yes, this works or it doesn't work. And that's exactly what engineering we do in systems engineering. It's a series of tests. What works, what doesn't work. If it worked, is this the desired outcome? And then you keep
Right.
building from there.
That's interesting to connect those two ideas because that makes sense to me. And I like to include like a practical piece to when we talk about things like this in general. Like there's always going to be the thing that grounds the action to the guidance,
Hmm.
right? Like kind of need both. Yeah, and the testing makes sense because anytime we create anything, we have to kind of put some action to it, see how it goes. And then, like you said, vet it. Is this the desired outcome? I love that.
Right.
Because sometimes we get caught up in like, all right, well, this kind of worked. So I guess I'll just keep going. And then you hit a wall somewhere later down the line, right?
Right. Sometimes you go with things just because they work, but that wasn't your original intention. And so that's important as well.
Yeah, that's important to keep the vision intact as well.
Absolutely.
So my dad's an aerospace engineer, and
Okay.
I'm familiar with that being a pretty male landscape, pretty male
Hmm.
dominant. Has that been your experience as well?
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, I can't tell the percentage, but I think I mentioned in meetings, sometimes I would like literally go around and count how many, like a huge meeting, how many women were actually in the meeting and then what their roles were, in the meeting as well.
That's a good point. Do you notice that the roles differ pretty greatly in who's in the room?
I mean, it depends on the type of meeting. Sometimes you'll have other female engineers. I think For my first job, I did have a female lead, and I think that definitely helped shape my engineering career. But
Mm.
sometimes, like, you do just have, or I'm not going to say just, but sometimes, women are assistants and not really the engineers in the room. So it does shape it.
Yes, yeah, it does influence how we. I think it truly influences like what we believe is possible for us when we see who else is in the room.
When you can see it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's important to have representation for those reasons. But with that said, has having such a like a day-to-day corporate sort of male dominant experience, was there like a craving to add more femininity to your life? Like this brand that you've created is so beautifully feminine. And was that part of it, or is that just something that happened anyway? Do you know what I mean?
I think it is part of it because in engineering it's so analytical, right? And there's a study done, the left side of our brains, I think the left side is like our creativity and the right side is more analytical. And so the feminine is more leaning toward the creative sides of our brains, where the masculine is more analytical. And women, we can go from both sides of our brains much more easily than men can. But I say all that to say that, in engineering, I'm using that analytical side of the brain all the time. And sometimes it can bleed into your personal life.
Mm.
That happens. I know I've had a discussion with a young lady who's a lawyer, and she was saying that bled over and like to her dating. And sometimes a man had to tell us like, hey, you're not cross-examining me. You can just, speak freely. So
Mm.
I think that's very important for us to come outside of like, especially masculine dominated careers or even entrepreneurship when we have to think all the time and just be able to sit, rest, and flow and lean into that creative side of our brain, that more feminine side of our brain.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that there was maybe a little bit of a craving to want to spend more time in your feminine side.
I will say more time understanding rest and the benefits of rest, or ease and the benefits of ease. So the brand is really surrounded around just finding that pause and that moment of rest in everyday life. While you're eating this honey, like don't just, like we talked about listening to our body. Don't just, I don't put it on some toast or some bread. Like sit down, eat it, enjoy it, feel as the honey moves through your body, and then you can go on about your day, but really taking intentional moments of rest and nourishment.
Does that feel like it lives more in that intentionality? Like, do you feel that that's more connected to our feminine sides, or is that just something that we should all harmonize towards, or both?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think feminine is more flow versus masculine is more force. We can look in the world today and see how I always heard an explanation. We think of like the wars, right, that go on. That's more of a forceful type of power versus like Sweden is always like neutral, right? But there's more of a feminine because they collaborate more. There's more communication. They're not going to just go into war. So it's a little bit of both. I think it can work. We all have masculine and feminine energy. So I think it can work for everyone. But if you are a woman who leans more toward the feminine, definitely tap into that more.
Yeah, or the opposite too. I think sometimes when we lean more one way, we may need a little bit more of the other to kind of bring in that harmony. So you also share about holistic wellness and the symbolism around honey and that connection that it has to our divine feminine. Can you just share a little bit more about that?
If we go into kind of myth, there's a Yoruba goddess or Yoruba pantheon, Oshun, and she's known as the goddess of sweet waters, fertility, feminine energy. She's just this beautiful goddess. And there's a story about her. So in Yoruba pantheon or Yoruba religion, there are gods and goddesses that relate to different aspects of nature. And so again, Oshun is sweet water, so she relates to the rivers. So there's Ogun, who is this god, and he does like iron. He's the industrial, so anything building he's over that. So he got mad one day because they were just not building, they weren't listening, everybody was just doing too much basically. So he went off and he retreated into the forest. And so the world pretty much stopped. Everything stopped working. And all the other guys tried to go and talk to Ogun to get him back, and nothing would work. So they sent Oshun. So she goes to him, she finds him in the forest, and she's in the water. She just starts dancing and singing to herself. She doesn't even pay attention to him. And so he sees her and he's attracted to her, something about her. He's attracted to something about her energy. So he gets closer. She sees him out the corner of her eye, but she just keeps on going on, singing and dancing till he gets closer and closer and closer. And finally, he's right in front of her. And her symbol is also the honey pot. So she carries a honey pot around her waist and she just dips into the honey and wipes it across his face. And his energy just totally transformed and he was retreated out of the forest. And it's just a kind of symbol that, feminine is just about being. Oshun didn't say anything to Ogun. She just did what she does. She enjoys herself, just enjoys being in her own body out, regards to other people dancing and singing. And she drew him to her. And by doing so, it just, being in her divine feminine energy, it just eased all frustration from him and confusion. And I think that's just very important that feminine energy is more so about being than doing, just being who you are, trust, tapping into yourself and understanding that.
Wow, that's powerful. And also, what a fun story. Can you remind me, if you did share it, what culture the story comes from?
Yoruba. So it's present day Nigeria, West African religion, but Yoruba.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just so people can place it if they want to like learn more or dig in a little bit on that area and the culture and any more stories and symbolism, because that stuff's really fun to learn about. I think it really informs sort of modern day if we start looking at those things.
Right.
And yeah.
There's so much power in mythology. And even, we talk about boss goddess, but goddesses from all over the world have such amazing stories if we just learn and kind of tap into them and then be able to apply it to our own lives.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So tell us where we can find your products and where we can find you.
So I am at SIIKA Herb and Honey Co. on all platforms. That's SIIKAHerbandHoneyco, and that's YouTube, Pinterest. I have this love affair with Pinterest, Instagram as well.
Thank you. And before we end, I would love for you to share two things. One, for someone wanting to get started with connecting with their own intuition, what would you suggest? What would you say to them? How should they start?
Really just trust yourself. Like it's something inherent, right? So it's not anything we have to learn. It's more something that we have to unlearn what we've been taught and tap back into what we already know, what our body already knows, what our spirit already knows, our energy, and just being able to tap back and listen to that. So just trust yourself. I mean, when if it's speaking to you now, you feel something that again, it's not constriction, but expansion, like, that's what's speaking to you and just really lean into that. The more you trust it, it's muscle memory. The more you trust it more, the easier it is to understand and listen to it.
That's so well said. I was going to say if there's anything else you want the listener to take away, but that was really beautiful. But if there's anything else you want to add that you want them to walk
Thank
away
you.
with. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I think that's really, again, the intention behind the brand. I created an entire brand just off learning to trust and listen to myself. It's an evolution. Be okay to evolve, be okay to change. That's the part of the journey. It's all a part of the journey.
It really is. Well, thank you so much. This was so lovely, Makuyo. And yeah, I can't wait for everyone to listen. And thank you for joining me. It's been a really lovely talk.
Thank you, Barcy, for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Boss Goddess podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you're inspired and ready to take action on bringing your passion to life with podcasting, then be sure to get my free Activate Your Passion with Podcasting blueprint at boss-goddess.co/activate to get started. That link is also in the show notes, but here it is again, boss-goddess.co/activate. And I'll see you on the inside.